Some Republicans are urging members of their own party to step up and call out extremists who could threaten a peaceful transition of power this week. That includes GOP Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse. Over the weekend, he penned an op-ed for The Atlantic where he argued the deadly insurrection at the Capitol earlier this month was not just, quote, a few bad apples, adding that Republicans, quote, must reject conspiracy theories or be consumed by them. Now is the time to decide what this party is about. One Republican trying to enact change is Elizabeth Neumann. She is the co-director of the Republican Accountability Project and also served as the Assistant Secretary of Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention at the Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration. Elizabeth, welcome. Thanks very much for being with us. Before we discuss accountability, I want to first ask you about the planning that went into the Capitol insurrection. Do you believe it's a centralized movement?
I think what we saw was a variety of movements come together and be coordinated in a way that they haven't been in the past. It is possible, as the investigation is starting to show us, that perhaps a small group of individuals were more coordinated than we've seen them in the past, and perhaps there was interaction between the various movements. And when I talk about the movements and the groups, it's everything from anti-government extremist militia, it's the white power movement like neo-Nazis, it's the Boogaloo Boys, although they did not appear to show up as strong as, say, the Proud Boys, who have been in the news quite a bit this past fall. And then you also had QAnon types, and then you just had people that were identified themselves as MAGA. They are Trump supporters. They were there because they believed the election was stolen. And all of those kind of converged. And depending on who you talk to in the crowd, they might have a slightly different reason for being there, a slightly different apocalyptic vision of where we are as a country and why violence was then justified. But it certainly was quite the moment for all of these to converge at one time and place. And I am concerned that then inspires them to continue to converge. We're already seeing efforts by white supremacist groups to recruit out of MAGA, and particularly people that might be disheartened that President Trump will not continue to be president, that their efforts were unsuccessful in terms of being able to change the election outcome. So it will be concerning to see what comes on the other side of this. I do think that what we are seeing out of the law enforcement, National Guard, to protect the inauguration is really, really important. I think it sends a strong signal that we will not be taken advantage of like we were on January 6th. And we are also seeing that might be helping to fracture the movement a bit, the deplatforming, making it harder for them to communicate, harder for them to coordinate. It may end up helping us in the long term to keep these movements separate and hopefully de-radicalize certain portions of them.
I want to ask you about support here. The FBI is looking at whether foreign actors may have used digital currency like Bitcoin to fund some of the far-right groups who stormed the Capitol. What can you tell us about who might be funding that part of that movement, and to what extent do you think that foreign actors may actually be involved?
We have seen foreign actors be cozy with right-wing extremists for quite some time. There are overlaps in ideology with authoritarian regimes and some of the ideology that a white power movement might ascribe to or an anti-government extremist movement might ascribe to. So it didn't surprise me to see that reporting. I imagine we might see other investigative leads to see trails. And the U.S. government's been fairly open about the fact that we have had at a minimum, efforts by Russia, by Iran, lesser extent China, to try to amplify disinformation during the election cycle. Certainly a large part of why we ended up on January 6th with this storming of the Capitol had to do with misinformation and misunderstanding of an election being stolen, and our adversaries have absolutely amplified that. What's different in 2020 than it was in 2016 is that the misinformation was coming from the president. It was not coming from an adversary. So the script kind of flipped. The misinformation came from within the United States, and our adversaries amplified it. And we'll see where the investigation goes. Maybe they did more. Maybe there was actually material support as well.
On this point of misinformation, on Twitter, you said that you believe the GOP can help to fix the problem they were complicit in creating. Realistically, at this point, what do you think needs to be done, and who should actually be leading those efforts from this point on?
Well, I was really happy to see Senator Sass's article in The Atlantic that you referenced in the opening. It is so important for the communities where these lies have taken root and where the conspiracies are residing. And it's so important for leaders in that community to speak out and to clearly state where the lies have been, what is true, what is not, in order to begin to de-radicalize a portion. I don't think it solves our entire problem, but let's just take a recent poll that said 50 million Americans believe that the election was stolen. We have the best security services in the world. You can't secure 50 million people. Now, not all of them would be violent, but even if 1% of them are violent, that's 500,000 people. That's too many. We can't grapple with 500,000 people that might be trying to overthrow the U.S. government. So we've got to reduce that pool of radicalized individuals, and thereby reducing the pool of people that might mobilize to violence, to give the security folks a chance at getting their arms around this threat. So one of the ways we think that can happen to reduce that pool is for members of the Republican Party, for leaders to speak out. And if they were complicit in the lie, that means they're going to have to own it and ask for forgiveness. And they need to do that with introspection. They don't need to do it flippantly, but they need to own the fact that they participated with Donald Trump in sowing these lies and amplifying his lies and getting us to this place where it scared enough people that they felt like they needed to go storm the Capitol. So it's really important for that message to come from the Republican Party, which is part of the reason why I joined the Republican Accountability Project. For me, this is more than about a party movement. This is very much about the soul of our country. When you have 50 million people in our country that are deceived by Republican leaders, we need to hold those Republican leaders accountable. And we're going to do this in a few ways. We have individuals of integrity that are willing to start to speak out, like Senator Sass did, like the 10 Republican candidate or congressional members that voted for impeachment. And we recognize that by doing that, they are incurring some political risk. And especially Donald Trump loves to threaten. He loves to bully his opponents. And he's already told them, we're going to run Trump-like candidates against you. And while I think I've heard from several of those members rightly say that I voted for the Constitution, I voted to not undermine democracy because that was the right thing to do. Even if I lose my job, that is absolutely the right answer. But we want more people like that in Congress. So we are going to help raise support to make sure that they are supported during their primary and push back against any Trump-led efforts to try to get them pushed out of office. And then the other side of this effort is to try to educate try to hold accountable those individuals who very clearly have decided that it was okay to undermine democracy, even after the Capitol had been stormed by insurrectionists. People like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. In my book, they should probably be held accountable by the Congress and removed from their positions. But if that does not happen, then we will look for opportunities, work with other partners to ensure that good quality candidates run against them. We think it's really important to send a signal to the men and women of integrity who are trying to stand up and do the right thing, that we have their back, that they are not alone. That is largely what got us into this mess in the first place, because we did not have enough people stand up and say, no, Donald Trump, what you're suggesting is wrong, it's illegal, it's a lie, pick your poison. We just didn't have enough people standing up and saying no to him. So we've learned our lesson. It is time for us to stand up, be men and women of integrity, and stand for our country over our party.
Before we let you go, Elizabeth, how much continued influence do you think Donald Trump will have over the GOP, even after he leaves office?
Well, I hope by moving this effort forward, we will lessen his impact. Again, I go back to that security perspective. This man has spent the last 5-6 years sowing dissent, sowing grievance, creating conspiracies and lies that sadly a huge number of our citizens, fellow citizens, have believed in. And in order for us to move past this, a lot of people like to use the unifying language of we just need to move past this. You do have to deal with the lies. You do have to hold people accountable. And if we can start that moment now, I think that gives us time to push Trump out of the party to the sidelines. I'm sure there will still always be some followers that pay attention to him, but we need to de-emphasize him as quickly as possible, if only for the security of the country, if not for the sake of having a strong, conservative, principled political element in our country. But I go back, for me, a lot of this is just about the security. We are in a very precarious moment. Now is the time for men and women of integrity to speak the truth. And if they need to do that introspection and apologize for their role in what happened on January 6th and with this Trump presidency.
Elizabeth Neumann with the Republican Accountability Project. Elizabeth, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.